Hey, so hello everyone, welcome. These conversations are ongoing. Hopefully, you're getting looking forward to hear your feedback on what you're taking away from these discussions. This is our second one on communications. We started with what bad communication looks like in terms of rural, and today we're going to focus on good, what good practice could look like, and we have some great examples that we want to share with you today. First, we'll begin with a kind of broad perspective on communications from the OECD perspective. If you've been following, we tried to bring in the OECD perspective in each of our conversations. Then we'll have three different country perspectives that I think will highlight just how communication could happen on the ground. And then I will provide more of a kind of a rural wrap up on this discussion. As a reminder, please use the chat. Introduce yourselves. Tell us where you are. Tell us who you are. Tell us why this subject is important to you, and maybe give us examples of where you think communication is working from where you are and where it could be improved, because this helps us. As always, whenever you have a question for any of our speakers, please put their names in all caps if possible and direct your question to them. If it's a general question, we will just let us know and one of us will come in and help to answer it. And feel free to provide answers yourself. If you see a question, give examples. We want this to be, as always, as interactive as possible. So we want to know who you are, where you are, why you're intrigued, and give us some examples yourselves of how communication is working. Um, to start off our conversation, we wanted to invite Shane to start us off. Shane knows communications from every angle. He sits within CFE. He's kind of who we go to ask about communications, and he's been really focusing and helping us drive rural communication. So Shane, I'd like to give you the floor. Tell us a bit about yourself and kind of set the scene for us on broad strokes on communications.
Yeah, thanks, Betty Ann, and it's great to be with you. And thank you so much for the invite today. So, as Betty Ann said, I do work at the OECD. I also have an anxiety disorder, a love of history, and a compulsive need to stay informed. So, needless to say, I'm a bit worried at the moment and waking up a lot in the night and wondering what I can worry about. But in saying that, I come from a perspective, as Betty Ann said as well, of strategic communications. And what we do, and you can see there in the title of this short 10-minute presentation I'm going to give, is that we use a lot of different approaches, but the main approach that brings our communications efforts together is a campaigns approach. And that can be applied there as, to urban communities as well as rural communities, regional communities, and so on. So what I wanted to do today is give you some basics, some foundations, some fundamentals, really about communicating with rather than to. So more of an inclusive term, rural communities. So maybe Eleanor, I'll just say next slide, if that's okay. There we go. So these are some of the big questions. So we're going to go through these questions today in around 10 minutes. Why is rural communication so hard? What is the campaigns approach? In other words, a longer term effort on communication strategy. What's in the model? What are good campaign dynamics? How do we listen? Can we tell human stories as well? Who are our messengers? How do we create these moments or these activation moments? And how do we go local and take away some things from these pointers? So next slide. So obviously, in terms of audience, we always start with who we're talking to. But when we're talking about rural communities, we're not always talking about a homogenous group. They're often the audiences are fragmented, and so are their interests. They also, in rural communities, we can feel a long way from the capitals and where a lot of the discussions are happening. So from those policy debates, and of course, there's a term in the OECD, the geography of discontent, that was coined a number of years ago to kind of sum up that trust gap that, can explain the differences, describe the differences between capitals and big cities and rural communities. And I've indeed got a story of rural communities. My wife's family live in the country in the west of France, so in a very, very rural area. And in fact, there's a whole battle going on there about wind energy turbines, because the residents there who like the rural lifestyle are not aligned with those that are in farming and in the agricultural sector. And in fact, you can see there that it's a very different kind of, people who like the country lifestyle as opposed to those there making their living. And so, yeah, all that to say that it can be quite varied in terms of the people that we're talking to. So if we go to the next slide. So indeed, the campaign's approach all revolves around this vision, and I don't want you to try to read through our vision that we've outlined, but I did highlight there that really a campaign's approach is getting the right message to the right people at the right time. And that really is the point of communications and engagement and public affairs. And that's the big point of the few things I'm going to show you in the next few minutes. So next slide. We always start, of course, with listening. And what a journalist friend once told me was that her job is actually to listen 80% of the time. So do interviews and talk to people, make phone calls, get on and off mic information, and then spend 20% of the time kind of drafting, the copy, the content, and pulling together that kind of effort to then disseminate it and broadcast and engage people. So the breakdown is around 80-20. And what that listening can do, next slide, Eleanor, is help us to guide some of the stages of a longer campaign. And I'm going to get into the fundamentals of a campaign. It can help us guide the process, as it were, but it can also, next slide, help us to guide the sequence. So listening to the audience, pulling together the content, creating what you want to achieve and what outcome you'd like to see at the end of it. FLIP is something I'm going to talk about in a moment, a famous acronym, and then, of course, messaging and planning. So next slide, Eleanor. So in terms of why we would use this campaign's approach, it's all about kind of building a bonfire rather than just having a one-off fireworks show, which has, in my experience, at least 20 years at the OECD and in other government jobs before this one, it kind of brings about better outcomes. The impact is greater when we build sustained attention and engagement. So that means listening locally, testing messages, and then taking what works and scaling it out through different networks. So next slide. Some of the elements that we've kind of tried to use to describe campaigns is it's a planned sequence of different moments that essentially tries to bring around some kind of change. And that's really what it is. We know that there are different types of campaigns out there in society. There's awareness campaigns, election campaigns. There's, action campaigns where we're motivated to take action on a certain issue. But certainly when we're communicating with rural audiences, campaigns are really about that sustained effort. And there's other elements too, Eleanor. Just go to the next one. So they're long, keep on pressing. Yep, planned, measured, of course, which you're going to talk about in the next session, engaging, and all about change, as I said. So next slide. So we're talking about months and years here, not just hours or days. And what we've had a tendency to do, at least in the OECD with our audiences, just kind of do a launch and then forget about it. But campaigns should be fed by moments. And what we can actually do is use this kind of acronym of a slow burning campaign where you have a pre-launch of forearming techniques. So a pre-promotion effort, maybe to get people to your event, do the launch itself, then interact or engage your audiences, and then use this social norming idea of propelling that information so that no one misses out. And then, of course, listening and broadcasting I already spoke about. So the next slide talks about FLIP. And what I'm going to do is actually share this slide pack with you so that you can have some of these techniques there. And then on the next slide for you to take home, you've also got the flip engagement kind of a schematic or a visual for that. So next slide. Campaigns are planned. So we do set out objectives. Of course, the messaging, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, is really important, and the whole storytelling dimension of that. And then, of course, really good content can help us get engagement and then bring about change and action. Next slide. So in terms of the planning as well, and I think, the title of this session is actually around good practice, but I'd actually say that good preparation and good planning is good practice. And of course, I love that old saying that I was saying to the team yesterday: fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So, building timelines and mapping, as it were, is going to be really important in, as it were, communicating to rural communities and audiences. So next slide is all about measurement, and I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to keep on talking, keep on moving. Next slide as well, Eleanor, please. So engaging. Now, this is a really important one because we can leverage certain relationships that we have with partners, stakeholders, those on the ground, horizontal action with those that might be in our own ministry or in our own community. And then, of course, making the most of the content, which is a big opportunity to get people deeper, to compel them or including a call to action so that they can act and bring about that change, which the next slide's on, Eleanor, thank you. Telling stories, which I'll talk about in a moment, how to tell the stories or how to broadcast those outcomes and the good ones, which today's session is about good practice. So selling the behavior change rather than a product or an institution. And then, of course, promoting what's changed and how. So what I'd want you to do, next slide, and then actually, if you go another slide as well, Eleanor, sorry. What I'd want you to do really to take away from all of this, to describe campaigns, there's 5 T's. Campaigns are timely, they're connected to current events. Campaigns are targeted, that's to say we break down the audiences and the messages. They're transversal, we work with partners across, as I just said. They're time bound, so they're defined within, a matter of weeks, months, or even years if they're longer ones. And the main thing that I wanted to say about campaigns and rural audiences and communities is that they're not a fireworks show, that they're not a one-off communications effort. They're a sustained effort to inform, first of all, engage, and of course, drive change, which is what it's all about. So if we go to the next slide, there are ways of doing this, of course. And the question really and the challenge is, can we tell human stories? Because people don't connect to the OECD or the ILO or the IMF or the WTO. They connect with people. And we've made a lot of effort to interview people like Betty Ann and colleagues to tell the story from the policymaker, from the expert. It's actually called Meet the Expert, so that people on the ground, beyond journalists, the informed public, private sector, academia, thought leaders, and so on, people beyond those particular audiences can relate to what our experts are saying. So rather than talking about an institution or an event or a person, we talk about a place that helped a certain person through a policy achieving this outcome. And that can be a really effective of telling stories. And if we go to the next slide, and again, this is just for you to take away and to potentially put into practice. But what we do in the CFE, where Betty Ann and other colleagues and myself work, is to create these message matrices. So what you've got is kind of the subject or the theme, the core message that you want to become the earworm for everyone, and then kind of supporting points, the numbers, the dread questions, the anecdotes and examples, of course, and, of course, metaphors and some of these other rhetorical devices can be really useful in storytelling. So in terms of the next slide, thanks, Eleanor. There are campaigners on the ground that we, and all of you, no doubt, on the call have relationships with. And here we're talking about local leaders and community voices, obviously politicians on the ground, leaders of cooperatives and owners of businesses, those professionals are doing essential work, teachers and health workers, journalists, of course, and then other NGOs and community organisers are key partners in the campaign model. Next slide. So in terms of creating campaigns, there's some more best practice. And if we go to the next slide, Eleanor, this one is a heavy slide, I realize, but again, do take it away. But the point of this is really being agile in that campaign's spirit or approach. Who do we want to reach? Identifying audiences. How do we want to reach them, or what do we want to achieve? In other words, the influence of those audiences, or to just inform those audiences. Obviously, using local languages is a big thing. I can't stress that one enough. That's a big point I want to get across, because we assume, you know, the OECD or the UN or other, you know, bilingual or, you know, 5-language officially, but basically, yeah, we want to do stuff in local languages as well for extra impact. And then kind of the how we get through, we've got different products we can use. There's different platforms and channels that we can use to get to them. So that's kind of Communications 101, but it's really relevant for rural communities as well. So in terms of the next slide, Elena, please. Going local first, of course, means doing it. So to just kind of sum up before I close off, leading with local relevance and people before your institution. So leave your brand aside and really look at the faces and the people, not the reports and the formats. Okay, I think that's a really, really important point. Now, there's another really important point about hybrid or offline or analog ways of communicating. So tangible products, glossy paper products, obviously in-person events as well. And there's different channels in rural communities. And because we can't just assume that the digital revolution is omnipresent and is relevant for everyone. So things like local radio, in-person events, as I said, different digital groups which work, and also community boards. So that's another way of thinking about the platforms, the channels, the devices for reaching people in rural areas. Thinking about the different messengers as well, and the networks, so farmers groups. Not say rural is farming, I'll never say that, but also, you know, politicians, cooperatives, even religious groups potentially, if that's a certain pathway. And then to keep it really concrete and simple. And the storytelling approach is one of those. What does this mean for the person you're talking to, and how can they apply that? So in my last slide, and my second last point is to kind of say what doesn't work, which was very much the focus of the last session in this series. So obviously using over technical language, but being urban and urban centric in the way that we kind of portray things, one-off communication. So the campaign model of a sustained bonfire approach, assuming everyone's digital. My parents are getting on, and I'm just realizing that there's such a massive digital gap concerning just not demographics, but also geography, and taking communities or talking to communities or at communities isn't going to work. It's really engaging with them, as the title of this presentation said. So what you can do straight away is think about going from broadcasting information to building trust. So through and with people. And of course, the campaign's approach is really about doing that over time, rather than just assuming, okay, one shot, spray and pray, this is going to get through. So start with a place or a person, not a report necessarily, or something analytical. Really make boil down your communications and messaging to the most plain language possible. Test it on non-experts and use one real example. And just to close out, I did want to say, again, thanks for the opportunity, but there are two decent pieces of media. If you have a television or you are subscribed to one of those streaming platforms, there's a new film called Rural, that's come out in France, which tells the story. It's in cinemas at the moment, actually, and tells the story of modern rural life and agriculture for one person living the southwest of France. So, of course, it goes through the daily life on the farm, and you know, he struggles to make a living. But there's also a really good story in there about how this individual is defending the role of rural communities. And there's a good story in there about the fragilities of rural communities, but also how his own community have built rural resilience. And of course, that was the theme of a recent OECD output, to get back to talking about reports. But obviously, there's a crisis in farming. But through this film, which I was fascinated by, the theme of kind of community and solidarity that really got through clearly. And the last thing I'd say is there's another TV streaming show called Clarkson's Farm, which is a bit Anglo-centric, I'd say, but something I've really enjoyed. Again, just to get to grips with what it's like for someone who's on a farm. And I actually wrote, a little blog piece on this in the lead up to Rio, to our rural conference last year, called Politics of the Paddock. And in fact, it just gives you a really great view and therefore appreciation of the issues facing not just farmers and the agriculture sector, but rural communities, and kind of how, as I said, they're fragile, and with the cost of energy and all sorts of other supply chain issues that we're seeing in politics and policy at the moment, they're fragile, but there is real resilience and hopefully strength and lessons from things like COVID and the financial crisis and what we're going through now. As I said, who's someone who gets really worried about these things, rural resilience really is a theme. And I just hope that the slides that I've shown, the big brushstrokes, as Betty Ann said, might be helpful for the rest of the good practices coming through the rest of the session. So thanks again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Shane. That was exactly what we were looking for. Thank you for setting up this conversation. You raised some really interesting points. I wanted to come back to a few of them, like, broadcast and build trust. I think that resonates with everyone here. Lead with local people, tell stories, take advantage of the different channels, and really activate your messengers. I think you said a number of things, but those are things that sprung to mind as you were talking. And I think it's a good lead in to the next person that I'm going to introduce now, because you said don't be urban focused. But ironically, Maria Seaman, who I invited to speak today, is urban focused. And this is on purpose, because we do want to have urban rural perspective in everything. And what I want to introduce her in a different way, I want to say I had the privilege of meeting Maria probably several months ago, because I worked on an urban rural case study, as it were, for Alba Iulia in Romania. And Maria works for the municipality of Alba Iulia, which is basically a large municipality. So it's an urban focused one. But why did I invite her? She's urban focused because what stood out to me about Maria's approach in communicating with rural was, and of course, Maria, correct me if I get anything wrong, but what stood out to me was that the city itself was growing and needed space, and they took a very strategic and targeted approach to engaging with rural. It was very deliberate. Instead of maybe sprawling, they communicated with rural actors. They tried to think a bit with them about how they could grow together and engage. And I spent a lot of time with them and understood a bit some of the things that they did. And one of the things was even how they built their connectivity and transportation lanes, was to think about, instead of what the city needed, but how they could showcase rural producers and also build an efficient transport network. And so I was really struck by that. And so one of the things I asked Maria when I met her probably 7 months ago was, how did you reach rural? How did you talk to them? And so I knew I wanted to have her today to share a bit about how they are going about engaging with rural. So Maria, that was my introduction to you. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Betty Ann, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm very, very glad to be here to share our perspective, even if it's more urban focused. We touched a lot the collaboration with the rural communities, and it's a privilege to be here today. So I will start with this first slide, showing you what Alba Iulia means. Alba Iulia, it's a small municipality. It can be compared also with a rural community, and we understand very well how many challenges a small community have in relation with the other cities. Alba Iulia, you may say, it's like a David fighting two Goliaths. It's Cluj-Napoca and Sibiu, two major cities, and Alba Iulia is just between them. So we understand the difficulties for smaller communities to develop and to remain attractive. This is why the first picture here, what you see, is the fortress of the city, the largest fortress of Romania. And we consider ourselves to be the other capital, maybe the most interesting capital you have never heard of until now. Next slide, please. In terms of positioning, we are situated in Transylvania, which is a real region. We thank Bram Stoker for promoting us in his book. Transylvania exists, and Alba Iulia used to be the capital of Transylvania. And you can see we are very well connected with 3 international airports. And you will see later on that we have a very generous rural area where we also try to implement projects. Next slide, please. We are also the first city in Romania to have a rating from a rating agency, one of the top 3. It was Moody's until now, and this year we contracted the services of Fitch Rating. And of course, the collaboration with the EBRD and the World Bank that help us prioritize and finance the major projects of the municipality. Next slide. And because we try to bring the best experts into our city, we contacted Ian Gale, the famous architect who closed the Times Square in New York, because we understand that a city for people, it's like a good party where people stay longer than necessary because they feel good. And this will not be possible if we only focus on the urban part of the city. This is why it's important to communicate and to promote also the attractiveness of the rural area. Next slide. We are also committed in the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. Next. And we are part of the Green City Accord of the European Commission. That shows ambitions that the municipality has in terms of in relation with the sustainable development of the city. Next, please. We are also the first Transylvania city that was awarded as a sustainable community by the Swiss Embassy in Romania. Next, please. And as we said, it's a small community. What we have, it's a medium-sized community, and we have made a lot of effort to work together with the rural communities, both through the joint services and through strategic planning. It shows that you cannot develop your city in isolation. Many challenges can be addressed together with other partners situated in the near of the city. And what we did in this direction was creating strong partnerships with the rural communities for mobility, for public services, and also for economic development. Next, please. Alba Iulia was the first city in Romania who actually managed to change the way how the public transportation was ensured. So if until then the local public transportation in the rural areas was in the subordination and the coordination of the county council, not the municipality. We managed to create an association that helped us organize the public transportation at metropolitan level. We were the first city in Romania to do that. And actually, our approach also managed to change the national regulation in terms of getting the public transportation from the county level to municipal level in relation with the communes that were interested to join the forces. Now we are 12, 12 members of this association created especially to address the challenge of public transportation. And that was not, let's say, it was something that was natural because Alba Iulia, it's among the cities in Romania that have a very big amount of commuters each day from the rural part to the city, but also from the city to the rural part as well. And beside the metropolitan public transportation, since we are a small city, we cannot be compared with a metropolitan area, but we are a functional area working together with rural communities in order to ensure public services of quality. So the public transportation and other public services like waste management or water management, this also includes creating association that creates the framework of collaboration between the municipality and the rural communities. Next, please. So how we engage the rural communities in practice? We said that we have big ambitions, and sometimes it's hard to convince the partners surrounding the city to join forces in a common goal. But when a common problem, a common challenge, it's tackled together, then it's way easier. So we don't invent a problem. We are aware of existing this problem in our communities, and then engaging this formal collaboration help us also achieve higher goals. What you see here, it's a climate city contract that the municipality of Alba Iulia has created with the help of the communities, the rural communities surrounding our city. And that's because during the application, only 10 cities were chosen at national level. And when we created the application, we addressed also the needs of the rural communities, and they participated actively, helping us be among the 10 cities that were chosen to be part of this climate city contract initiative, 10 cities in Romania, and to have a common goal for 2035 in reaching climate neutrality. Next slide, please. Coming back to communicating difficult news or decisions, we said that we have a successful association that addressed the waste management, now respecting all the European standards. And here what is important is the fact that now the entire county benefits of a real infrastructure that helps cities and the rural communities to have a very efficient system of collecting waste at county level. So the decision in constructing this infrastructure on a rural area was hard to be communicated, also hard to be decided by the rural community itself, But at the end, the efforts of the county council, together with Alba Iulia municipality and all other rural communities, managed to implement this project, and now it becomes an example of good practice. Next, please. So Betty Ann was mentioning the study conducted by OECD in Alba Iulia, where we had the chance to meet each other in April, May last year. And I think this is also an example of good communication for urban communities, because when the delegation of the OECD came to Alba Iulia, the municipality made sure to invite all the relevant political representatives of of the rural area to be present at the table of discussion. So they also had the chance to participate in a high level and discussion, and to contribute to a study that will speak not only about strengths or weaknesses of Alba Iulia municipality, but also of strengths and weaknesses from the rural community. And this is also important, to create this long-term partnership, to invite them at important meetings, and of course maintaining regular communication and informal dialogue. Next, please. One example that I would like to share of good practices, considered to be a good practice, it's a recent project that we developed. Okay, we have the public transportation. It's an example of good practice at national level. We are very proud with that. But after that, because it was so long time ago when this transport mechanism was considered to be a good practice example. What we did after that, in which domains we continued the collaboration with the rural communities. And this here, it's just an example on how we managed to submit together in partnership a project to be financed under European funding European funding projects by the regional agency, which is the managing authority for this program, the regional program development. And it was very working with European funding. It's also bureaucratic. It takes a lot of effort creating and giving all the necessary documents to be submitted together with the project proposal. So when it comes to having only one partner or only one lead partner that submits the project, it's one thing. But when you do this jointly with other communities, it shows that they not only trust you in this, but they also want to tackle these challenges together with you. And it was a very nice project. It doesn't have a big financement, but the impact actually will be very relevant for the municipalities and for the rural communities, because it will connect all the video surveillance cameras from the territories of all rural and urban communities in the functional urban area that are part in this project. And through this, let's say, innovative solutions that we are going to implement together to create a platform dedicated to send alerts for relevant authorities in case of theft or in case of violence or in case of misconduct by driving your car, and to address it at a metropolitan area. This will be the first time for us to have also a sustainable urban mobility plan, because it will be the diagnosis, the basis of creating the departure for this important sustainable urban development plan. And this is for the first time that the municipality has in mind this, and we are very proud. Next slide, please. Yeah, I was talking about the 10 cities in Romania that are committed to reach climate neutrality. And as I said, we applied together with the functional urban area. Next slide, please. So what didn't work as planned, and lessons learned. So we are aware that not all approaches work perfectly. Some initiatives have faced challenges. For example, difference in priorities between urban and rural municipalities, administrative or financial constraints, difficulties in coordinating multiple local authorities. In nowadays, we have an important matter to discuss on the agenda with the rural communities, and this is how to find a solution to reduce the cost for public transportation. Okay, we are a good practice example at national level. It's very important that we organize ourselves in a metropolitan association and we provide public transportation at metropolitan level. But what can we do together, working together with rural communities to reduce the cost and to keep the same quality of public services that was until now? Next, please. So we want to think that the experience of Alba Iulia shows that strong urban-rural cooperation is essential for the sustainable regional development through metropolitan transportation, shared public service, inclusive planning processes. The city and its neighboring rural municipalities have tried to build collaborative approach to development. Of course, challenges remain, but we hope to continue the dialogue and the cooperation and help ensure that both urban and rural communities benefit from shared progress. Next, please. And very, very quick, because I think I don't have much time left. I will go to the next, to the instruments that were used by the municipality. So we try to increase the collaboration with the local stakeholders. Next slide, please. I'm not able to see the slides anymore. Are we?
No, we can see them.
So you have the slide with the external funded projects now?
Yes.
Okay, so we are good. I'm not able to see it. That's why I was asking. Thank you for that, for helping. So between the instruments that we use to transparent communicate with our partners, also with the rural communities, is, for example, this website that we created. It's a website created in-house by the team of the municipality in order to communicate the projects that are under implementation by the municipality in partnership with with the rural communities or with other partners. But it's made out in-house, and it shows also the degree of implementation, the results, the indicators. Is a very good way to show the results of your work. Next, please. Another instrument is participating in different transnational funded projects where we exchange experience with other communities similar with ours, with rural communities, with urban communities, with large municipalities. And these kind of projects really help us increase our capacity building at city level among the employees of the city, but also increase the communication skills at all levels with rural communities, but also with other partners. I'm not a communication officer, but being part of this transnational exchange, it really helps me see other perspectives and how we can improve the collaboration, the communication with the relevant actors. Next, please. And this is a very dear slide of mine. Alba Iulia is recognized to be an example of good practice in city branding. And what you can see here, it's actually also the work of the rural communities that wanted to connect their products with the image and the logo and the brand manual of Alba Iulia. It's a bread made by a local producer that used the logo of the city, and a wine bottle of wine created especially for the citadel of Alba Iulia, also using the signs and the visuals of our branding strategy. And because it was a good practice recognized by the European Commission, we are also very proud that we are not alone in this story, and that private companies, local producers want to connect their products to our own storytelling, because it was mentioned before. Next, please.
Excuse me, Maria. Do you think it would be possible just to get some final points, please?
Yes, of course. So at the end, we just want to say that it's important to find new instruments that are available at the level of other municipalities or rural communities in Europe, and to just replicate their results in our own communities. So if there are questions, I'm very happy to answer.
Thank you, Maria. That was a really nice presentation, and I liked that you emphasized stakeholder dialogues, the website that you created to be a bit transparent about the finances and the kind of how the projects where they are, and also the transnational projects that allow for more visibility of both urban and rural together. And I know that in of itself, it's a hard work. And so I like that you pointed out the challenges, but I feel like the work in progress is there and the results are visible. And we saw a bit of that. Please, Maria wasn't able to say, I'm sure, a lot of what she wanted to say. So feel free to ask her questions in the chat. She will be around and again for the Q&A later. I wanted to switch gears now to Daniela, who brings a different perspective. She's going to be talking about communicating and bringing in young people. And this is very relevant because we know that young people are kind of the hidden voice of rural communities. We need them, we want to keep them. And so, how we bring them into the conversation and how we bring them into larger discussions is very important. So Daniela will give us a good example of that. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Betienne. Thank you for this opportunity to share my experience, but also to have this exchange on good practice of communication. My presentation will give an insight, an overview of multiple rural communication initiatives that have been realized by the Italian Rural Network for the agricultural policy. And then we will focus on, as illustrative example, on the Young Shepherd School that is focused, as Betienne was saying, on young people. Next slide, please. Okay. Before we go into into the presentation, I think that is good to clarify what is our, view of good practice in rural communication, why we propose this project and this experience as a good practice. Good rural communication practices are initiatives that enable farmers, rural actors, institutions to share knowledge, learn together, innovate through participatory and accessible and context-based communication methods and tools. So in this respect, examples of good practices in rural communication can be seen as several experience, learning schools, thematic initiatives, serious game developed by the rural network in Italy can be seen as good practice of rural communication in this perspective. Okay, next slide. This is like an overview of several initiatives we have been developing. Most of them are still ongoing, but they were first developed in the last programming period. So there are several initiatives. As you can say, the trade union is that they are all innovative knowledge sharing and learning practices that were developed as part of the national communication strategy of the Common Agricultural Policy. These strategies, this initiative have, the objective of supporting new priorities that are innovation, sustainability, social inclusion in rural areas. There are two main categories of initiative: the schools and serious game. We will be focusing in the following part of the presentation of one of the schools, that is Young Shepherd School, that in Italian is Scuola Giovanni Pastori. But we also have other kind of initiative that are the serious game, pack game, and Oliario trivia. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. No. Which one is okay? This is I don't remember the. Okay, yes, this all the different initiative, they have a specific format, target, objective, and cognitive mechanism. As you can see, we have a pack game that is a board game that is as a format of strategy simulation. Is the target audience are high school students, but also policymakers. The main objective is that to develop policy awareness, and the cognitive mechanism used is the scenario management. Then there is Oleario Trivia that is more focused on middle and high school students, and the main objective is to focus on heritage and knowledge recall, and use a cognitive mechanism of gamified polling. Finally, the Scuola Giovanni Pastori, that is a Young Shepherd School, that we will focus more deeply in the next part of the presentation, is as a format that as format uses participatory didactic and nomadic training, is focused on young people engaged in mountain pastoralism, as cognitive mechanism uses immersive practice, and the primary objective is to develop vocational transformation and community building. Next slide, please. So altogether, this different project, but also others that other initiative that I won't cover in this presentation because it would be too difficult. The overall objective of these tools, one is to reframe the rural narrative. So to tell a different story about traditional pastoralism and agricultural, from a story of abandonment to move towards a showcase of social and ecological innovation. So we use these tools, storytelling, communication, gamification, to change the narrative and to go from rural decline to ecological transition, to counteract obsolete profession with smart rural communities and multi-level governance, geographical isolation, with the idea of the new pastoralism and the next generational agriculture that could be the center of a changing, a change in rural places. Next slide, please. So now let's focus on the Young Shepherd School. The Young Shepherd School is as an initiative focused on young people living in rural areas. And before to go in the description, I will go to the next slide where we have there is a short clip that will tell you more about this initiative using image, video, while, and because I think that is the best way to introduce you to the initiative. Could you please start the video? There is, if you click, did you have? Okay, thank you very much. Can we go back to the presentation? Because just, a few words more on the project. So, the next slide, please. So, as I was telling you, the overall objective is to build to change the narrative. But in order to change the narrative, you need to have to contextualize this new narrative, in specific, to link to specific visions and element. So in this slide, we have, I tried to synthesize the main element. We link the project of Young Shepherd School. So there is the need to rethink the human-earth relationship, the active choice to care for and regenerate rural territories, and also the need to integrate the vision. We need to have a vision that integrates human, animal, and ecosystem health as a foundation of sustainable development. Finally, we developed this experience on evidence. So the design of the school is based on the result of rural youth survey outcomes that guided the creation of the Young Shepherd School. Next slide, please. So this survey that was realized, was promoted by Associazione Riabitare l'Italia and was developed together with several partners, between which was CREA, my institute. The main result of this survey were to realize that it is not true that most of the young people living in rural, more remote areas wish to leave. Most of them, almost 70% of these young people living in rural areas, wish to remain in inner areas. Only 9% consider agricultural and pastoral work as a fallback option. Also, among the motivation for working in agriculture, there are the choice of a simple lifestyle and the close contact with animals. And also there is, the relation, the vision of nature that is the sign of a change in sensibility, a change of vision of young people. In fact, 60% of the respondents perceive nature as a pristine environment where they can restore themselves and regain inner balance. Next slide, please. So there is a very positive perception of nature. So on this result, we decide to build a project that would, next slide, to respond to the needs of young people wishing to start pastoral enterprise. The point is that together with this desire to stay and the positive perception of nature, the survey also highlighted that it's difficult to, to reach specific knowledge and specific network to help to sustain young people willing to start a new activity in agriculture. So we decided to design this school to help these young people, accompanying them and also supporting them with specific training, but also creating a community around them. So we developed already two editions. The first one took place in Piedmont and Lombardy in the 2022, and the second one in 2024 in the Madonie, in Sicily, in the Madonie Mountains, that were, where the video that I showed you before took place. The third edition will take place in the south of Italy. Let's next go to the next slide. Here we have an overview of the first two editions of the school. As you can see, we had 30% participants and coming from a different background, like from not only from rural areas, but also from urban areas, and also from different sectoral, from family, from rural family and also from urban families. The two editions were developed together with local community, in the local community in Piedmont and in Madonie region, with a wide partnership network, and also they had a very, they were really successful. Also, the first edition was won the Food and Wine Award in 2022, and also was shortlisted within the European Agriculture and Rural Inspiration Award in 2023. So on the communication level was very successful because we could communicate a different message, a different narrative. Young people, they don't want, but because this is true, this is based on evidence gathered from the survey. And so this initiative was a way to communicate this message through practice, like not just saying it, but just doing things that show that really young people are interested, because the participants were 30, but we had, because we cannot manage more than 15 participants at the time, but we had more people, like 100 people, they wanted to participate in this school. So actually there is something that that is important there. Let's go to the last, okay.
I'm sorry just for interrupting again, but since we're having a bit of a tight schedule,
Yes,
would it be
I
possible
need,
just...
let's go to the other slide, like go, next slide. Okay, let's go back. In the picture, you can see our students. In the picture, you could see, okay, you can go to next slide. And they come, as I told you, from diverse background. They are united by the interest in the new pastoralism, that is a new way to, more respectful, more sustainable way to do this job, this activity. And our goal was to create two community, and the participant of the first two edition, they also benefited from the training, but continue their journey, and we keep monitoring them and we interact with them. So there is the community still going on, and is going to be to become bigger with the third edition. Next slide, please. And as you can see here, there is the image of the different sites in Italy. Let's go and think that we are a nomadic. We don't, it's not a school that has is physically bounded to a place, but we move from one place to another where there is a community interested in this project. And as you can see, also the storytelling part is very important. You see the quote in the Module 4, Voice of the New Generation, that are quoted from the young people participating to the school. So this is a very important element. We link the communication to the story of the young people participating in the school. Next, please. Next slide, please. And yeah, it's like to summarize, what we used, the gear we used in this project, the storytelling and dissemination, the community building, the digital platform, the territorial networks, the things that the school is not just a training program, it is a communication device in itself, and is the tool we use to reshape the cultural representation of pastoralism. And I would say that we were, in a certain extent, successfully. In fact, our school is just one of the many schools that are going on in Italy in these last years. We have a school in Sardinia, another in Tuscany, another now in Abruzzo. So, and there is interest from other regions like Lombardia asked us to develop the new school with them. Also in Lazio region, we have interest from Molise and Basilicata. So the point is that we really succeeded in changing the cultural representation of pastoralism and acknowledging that young people are interested in this job, in pastoralism, but in a new way, that is in a new perspective, with a new, is not just a job, is also a way of living, to choose to stay in the countryside, to choose to live in remote areas where you don't have opportunity, but you have wonderful landscapes, and you have the value of the community and the value of nature and environment. So I would say that we really succeeded in this objective. And the last slide, and then I'm done. And okay, just summarize, but this is just a summary of what I already told you. So the key impact was to really change, to give a visibility of pastoralism as a sustainable and innovative profession, attraction of new generation to rural and mountain areas, development of communities of practice, and the contribution to smart rural communities and ecological transition. So thank you very much for the attention. Sorry for if I took too much time and.
No, Daniela, no, thank you. And I like that we're getting different aspects of communication. And I think it's important to point out that the communication with young people and the fact that young people still want to be there, how you reach them, how you attract them, the fact that it is attracting other interests is says something about the way that you're reaching out. Don't want to take too much time. We'll come back to it. Want to bring Canada into the conversation. And Stacia, the floor is yours to provide maybe a different perspective.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having us, the Canadian Northern Federal Development Agency, here to present. Thank you to the other presenters. My desk is covered with notes about information that you've shared that I think can apply to what I'm talking about. So we'll see if I can tie it together. But I would say, Daniela, that video you showed makes me want to explore pastoralism. So I think you've been effective in changing the narrative. So thank you for sharing that example. So my name is Stacia Keane. I'm a senior policy analyst with CanNor, the Canadian Northern Development Agency. And I'm going to speak to you today about some of the ways that we've been communicating from an urban perspective, or from a rural perspective, to engage our stakeholders in some major policy shifts across Canada. So next slide, please. So I always like to place where we are. The Canadian Arctic is roughly 40% of Canada's landmass and more than 70% of our coastline. We have a map here to show the proportions between Europe's territory and the Canadian Northern Territories, just to show the scale and size of the land that we're talking about. We have about 136,000 people, so a smaller population, but we also have 11,000 active businesses. And we know through geopolitical shifts and attention right now that we're certainly seeing an increase in the attention and the strategic value of Canada's Arctic. I just have a picture here on the far left. This is where I live. This is Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories. And this is actually exactly what it looks like. It looks like a fairy tale and it feels like one. It's a beautiful winter city that I love being part of. Next slide, please. So CanNor, we're a regional development agency, so we deliver on Government of Canada's priorities in some of the key ways are funding, advocacy, collaboration. We have place-based programming. We do have a focus on defense and supply chain integration, and we provide major project support. I also want to just highlight here that our president, Jimmy Onalik, was born in Iqaluit and raised in Rankin Inlet, Nunavut, so brings a lived northern perspective from a rural context to the policy development that Canada has with regards to the Arctic. Next slide, please. So I'm going to tell the story about a memorandum of understanding that we signed with our territorial government and an event that we held as a communication vehicle. But I'll link it to what the policy context is. So right now, the Government of Canada is focused intently on advancing nation-building projects. So these nation-building projects are intended to strengthen communities and build Canada's long-term economic resilience. They're also a key opportunity to advance business opportunities for Indigenous peoples in Canada. There's been a real shift in Canada from Indigenous peoples being as stakeholders to be consulted and rights holders to be consulted into owners of projects and partners in these major projects who benefit in the decision-making of how projects happen and also in the financial returns that they generate for the community. So Indigenous governments and economic development corporations have expressed that there's consistent barriers to accessing capital for equity participation. So to Shane's point, when we're doing a lot of listening, we've heard that that's an issue and that's a problem. And it's a problem also from the Government of Canada's side. We've seen an increase in the number of funding programs, but there's a common challenge for government departments to access rural audiences too. What's the best way to get our message to them? So CanNor is in a unique place where we have our relationships with our other Government of Canada departments, and we also have a deep knowledge and relationship with Northerners and folks living in rural environments. So we're often a conduit in that way. So in January, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the Government of Northwest Territories, where I live, and it was intended to support some federal key policy areas through the Building Canada Act, the Canadian Minerals Strategy, and we wanted to implement that through a funding symposium. So this was an opportunity to connect federal funders with Indigenous governments and economic development corporations in order to increase the uptake of those federal programs and therefore their participation in business opportunities. So that's setting the stage. Next slide, please. So what worked? I talked a bit about what we did. So it was an MOU. We were holding a federal funding symposium. This is an event intended to reach Indigenous governments and economic development corporations. We see from this photo, this is our Minister of Northern and Arctic Affairs, as well as the Minister of Finance in the territory. So this was an opportunity to strengthen those relationships. I also love this picture because in the back corner, you see my counterpart, who's Matthew Senkow with the territorial government, who's doing all the work to make the event happen. And this is important for a couple of reasons. Because this opportunity for us through the MOU and through the symposium was, in Shane's words, also a horizontal opportunity. We really needed to collaborate closely with our other government departments and the territorial government in order to reach this common stakeholder group. And through the MOU, we created those communication channels to be able to reach a common stakeholder group in a very coordinated way. And often the stakeholder group Indigenous governments, corporations who want to access funding, get information from everybody in all kinds of different ways. The territorial government has funding, the Department of Fisheries has funding, the Department of Natural Resources has funding, but it's hard to understand how those all fit together. So Canmore really took a leadership role here to coordinate the messaging so that it was easier for the stakeholders to access it. Next slide, please. This is just an example. So the focus that we wanted to do, again, to unlock some of the applications to those funding streams was to we had to focus on those programs with a value of over 1 billion. And these are some of the Canadian federal development departments and agencies that provided that funding. Next slide, please. So again, some of the things that were important to us when doing this, and I'm building on what we learned in the previous session with this OECD series, was a key part of communication is informing, engaging, and listening. So we informed participants about the direct pathways to access federal funding. We engaged through having Northern voices at the forefront as well. So participants would access funding before who are from the North. How did it work? What worked for them and how did they do that? We had a two-way dialogue in order to make sure that we could capture those attendees at the event, what were their interests in future policy developments and future funding streams, and how could we incorporate them into products that we develop again. And we had over 50 participants. And then I want to just, a key part of how we planned this as well is that when we talked about this in the previous session on what not to do in communication, is to put communication first. Often it's the afterthought of now, okay, we planned this event. Now, how do we let people know about it? So we did, how to market and great campaign information was already shared, so I won't touch on that, but I'll touch on what to do after and how to make sure you capture the information to share out broadly, because travel is expensive in from rural communities. Not everyone can do it. You often only have a few people from each community who can attend big events or workshops. So it was important that we had a photographer to build on some previous points, to tell the faces, capture the faces and the stories behind what we did, not only the report. We also paid to have the event recorded so that we could have a tangible product that we can share out again with all of the rural participants who would have wanted to be there but couldn't. So capturing and recording is valuable in any context. I think it's particularly important to acknowledge when we're thinking of a rural audience in terms of who has access to the information. The other piece is that we know that, and again, we talked about this in the last session, but 50 participants, you might look at and think, okay, is that, I thought our goal was 50, we had 53, I'll be honest. So we were pretty happy about that. But in a rural context, 50 can mean a lot because of who you have in the room. So because who we had in the room were Indigenous leaders, decision makers, the CEOs of the economic development corporations, the information we were sharing gets amplified tenfold because the information that those leaders are getting in the room is sharing back out to these communities of 1,000+ people. So that's an important part of the metrics of how we measure the impact. Next slide, please. Here's our federal territorial presenters, a nice photo of everyone up at the front of the room. And a key part here I just want to talk a bit about is that from an internal communication role, the ownership and responsibility that Canmore decided to take as a federal agency to coordinate all these people. So each of the presenters here has a mandate to deliver their programs under a guiding policy directive to a rural northern audience. But Canmore took the initiative to coordinate that messaging, bring all of these people together, hold multiple meetings in the months leading up, do the planning, work with the territorial partner. I prepared all the slides ahead of time because sometimes getting slides from presenters can be a challenge in and of itself, as we probably already know. So what can we do to make the communication internally easier, and then also give them a value add coming out of it through the recordings, through the photos, so they would want to do it again. So there were really important coordination pieces that we played as an agency that weren't necessarily directed to do, but that we saw an opportunity and a need for, and took that role. Next slide, please. Who's in the room? So again, we tell the pictures through, we tell the story through pictures. So we had a Government of Canada representative and our Yellowknives Dene First Nation CEO and leadership. We had private sector consultants, and we had our environmental impact review boards in the room as well. Next slide, please. Can I just say one thing? These pictures might not mean they're beautiful, people look engaged, but the important part is that when I share this presentation across the North, people know who everyone is. It's a small world. The rural world is a small world in your country. Everybody knows each other. So when you share it, when you capture these kind of pictures and share that story, it amplifies the credibility of the what you're communicating as well, and it also helps people to see themselves in what you're talking about, and that's really important. Next slide, please. This is a product that we developed. Again, engage with your communications team early. So we engaged early to map out what we wanted to leave people with as a takeaway. I also worked really closely with other federal departments to get this information. And I would say, as we all know, but I think it's really important when we talk about intergovernment, like horizontal communication, is I had coffee with my counterparts in other departments. And then when it came to, and we make the time to build those relationships. When I needed their input, the first reaction I got was, we don't have time. And then they thought about it overnight, and then the next morning said, we can make time. But to me, that shows how important it is that you have those relationships, because when the time comes to communicate, you're already in a positioned well to work together, and you don't have time to do that when things are moving fast. Next slide, please. Where matters. So when we're talking about engaging with rural audiences, we have so many platforms and formats to do this. In this case, where matters because we knew a lot of our target group would be at this major mining conference in Toronto, which is a major city in Canada. We knew that the people that we wanted to touch on, so the decision makers, the leaders, the CEOs, would be at that conference. And this is a very high level conference. So having a presentation like this there sent a message that the Indigenous partners we were working with were coming to the session as partners and as owners. And I think that credibility was important. Next slide, please. So the clarity on our policy objectives in terms of Canada's priority on advancing major nation-building projects really helped to mobilize internal coordination and external participation. We're at a really interesting time in Canada right now. We've had some really strong messaging coming out of our Prime Minister's office, and it's mobilizing all kinds of different sectors to work together on a common goal, which is, I've seen from a communication perspective, make it easier to collaborate. We know that our Indigenous governments and development corporations were essential partners, and again, including sequencing is important, not asking people after you've developed the plan, asking people before you develop the plan, what should be in the plan. These formal intergovernmental structures enable better communication. So we talked about that in one of the previous presentations, but the Memorandum of Understanding, this was a first deliverable. There are others to come, but it's given us a good vehicle to communicate. Also to address challenges. So there, as things get close to an event, everybody's stress goes up and there's different, everyone has a different idea how things should work, but having this formal structure and consciously building that relationship really helped us to address challenges as they came up and make sure that at the end of the day, we were able to deliver what we wanted to and set the stage for future engagements. That communication at every level was important. It was at the political level, our vice president level, assistant deputy minister, right down to myself as a senior analyst. We all worked with our different counterparts within the territorial governments and other stakeholders, which I think, again, helped to make it successful. And then the last piece I'll say is good rural communication, and we've talked about this, is responsive and it's not assumed. And this is one of the key takeaways that we're always building on, but we see this as a first step, and we've had a request to do a similar event, which we'll do. So there's the presentation. Always available to talk more about that or answer any questions, and thank you for the opportunity for us to share.
Thank you so much. So you've got three perspectives today that I hope you three different angles on communication. You have one that looked within rural at communicating with young people. You had one that looked from a city perspective and how a city cooperates with rural, and now you have and Stacia gave us a kind of government lens and how they bring in and communicate initiatives to rural. So maybe perhaps bring up my slides. And what I wanted to kind of bring it all together, and I have 4 slides that I actually prepared before I saw the presentations, but I feel comfortable that I captured it. So we'll see. So what I wanted to give this conversation is some context. So go to my first slide, please. What I wanted you to think about is what you kind of heard. So normally we have a traditional approach where it's kind of more government informing citizens, language that is kind of more urban focused or not really like multilingual, as you heard earlier, and a delivery mechanism that is a bit stiffer. So it's a bit more top down and more of an announcement. And this has been reaching or kind of coming into today. There's some limitations that we've been seeing now that this approach has some limitations. So go to the next slide. So I hope what you saw is the context. We have different actors and we have some issues in rural that is mandating the change that our presenters kind of leaned into. We have the trust deficit. I don't need to bring it up. I'm sure everyone is hearing that trust in rural communities is the lowest in national governments. And we have what I call entrepreneurs. I don't think you would call them entrepreneurs, but I was finding a lovely way of saying we have some actors who may be taking advantage of messages to mobilize and to use information, probably not in the way we would like them to use information. So we have some vulnerabilities, and we have to talk about the context within which we exist. The next slide, please. Then we also have the digital piece. We have co-creators out there. We have different channels. We spoke a bit about this in the first series. Podcasters, YouTube influencers, well-intentioned, but they're also available to take whatever messages that are out there, whether they're rural to rural, urban to rural, or wider, and they're intentioned to help spread the information. But if the information is not understood, they could they could also do some harm. So these are all the frameworks today that are coming into the space and competing with government in how they get information out. Next slide, please. And this is essentially what it looks like, right? So the information vulnerability that I alluded to is coming into rural communities from all these different spaces, right? So government is having to compete, and not just government, city, rural, how you reach young people, etc. You have to navigate these multiple channels. So that's why this idea of evolving the way you communicate is so important, because a well-intended policy or even a policy that could have unintended consequences would be trapped in this space if there isn't a new way of approaching, if you're not intentional. And Stacia's example of that is bringing that into what that means, being more strategic. So my final slide, which is the next one, or second to final, kind of tries to set up or capture everything that I think we heard in a formal way. Like, what does good rural communication practice look like? And you can challenge me in the chat if you think I captured it or if I missed something. But there's the governance of it. There is the evidence, right? Take an evidence approach based to communication strategies, being more agile, as you heard, going a bit beyond what is needed. Maybe you're coordinated, maybe you are reaching out, being a bit more transparent, bringing actors to the table early. There are different elements of that are they coexist together. There's not one. They're all working together to deliver you a better kind of practice with rural communication. And I do have a final slide. And the last slide is about, which was kind of touched on today, but I wanted it to be the last slide you saw. Eliminate, plain language, participation, bring in rural in as co-creator partnering. Maria talked about that. In the Canada example, bringing them to the table early, empowering local messengers. Shane talked about that, and leveraging the multiple channels that we have to reach communities, understand what channels they use, conferences, radio, whatever that may be, and being visible and using them, being multilingual, basically using the language that makes sense, and deploy proactive defense. It becomes important because misinformation, my mom would say an empty chair will be filled, right? So if you're not talking to rural, someone else will talk to rural. So you need to stay ahead of the communication, especially when it has to do with the strategies, information, and thinking about how to co-design and bring them in early. So that was a quick way. You can take my slides down. We will share them with you of bringing it all together. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. We are happy to take one or two before we close. I know we're 1 minute over, but if there's a burning question, we will take it. And you can just raise your hand. If I see none, I'm assuming that you have no burning questions for any of our speakers. Seeing none, as always, we will share the slides. We'll share the recording as well. The next conversation will be about how do you measure success? And this is very important because we know it's not just announcing that you have announced a strategy, but how do you know that it resonated, that it reached the community, that they understood it? And that is probably the most challenging part because we don't know and it's probably not measured well. So we will be gathering a few journalists as well as other examples of where we can see that the communication received the message and it was understood. And hopefully that will highlight or illustrate some examples that you can bring into your own practice. So with that in mind, don't hesitate to join us for the last in this series. I hope you're finding it interesting and don't hesitate to reach out to us. So thank you. We did 2 minutes over, but I hope you thought the conversation was good. See you on the next conversation. Thank you again to our speakers.
Thanks, Betty. Thanks, everyone.